What was the original impetus for the series? How did that develop?
The original impetus for the series was, I don't know how far back you want to take this, but I had a deal.
To the original
I
impetus.
I had a deal with Brillstein Gray to develop television series. I had worked on Northern Exposure and a couple of other many other shows, and so I had a development deal.
But you hadn't created a series
I
yet,
had created one series in 1988 that stayed on the air for about 6 episodes.
What was that called?
It was called Almost Grown. And it had some similarity to The Sopranos, but at any
In
rate,
what way?
The use of pop music and rock and roll. That show was all about music, and we used a lot of source music just like we do in this show. But that show was about a couple. Was about a couple who meet in high school in the early '60s. They go through the famous '60s, all that tribulation, and then they have children of their own. It was the early '80s. By the early '80s, they have teenagers of their own. Or by the '80s, and so that show.
So it was a family.
It was a family thing, but it went back and forth in time. So
Right.
sometimes you saw those people as seniors in high school. Sometimes you saw them going for their draft physical. Sometimes you saw them as parents, and it was. And every episode would go back and forth through all those different eras of their life. It was very difficult to do.
I bet. Would you say Almost Grown was the beginning of The Sopranos, or
No, it was just it was the first show that
you created.
That I created.
Right.
But it did have these. They were from New Jersey. This couple, they'd moved to California, and in the use of music and the kind of music, it was sort of a kind of a forerunner, just in that respect. But it was a different. But it was a family drama, actually. Come to think of it.
So go ahead. So then, how did
So
Sopranos evolve?
because I had run some successful shows, and all through my career, really, I started getting development deals. After my work on the Rockford Files, I started getting development deals. And the fact of the matter was, I didn't want to be working in television ever. I wanted your job.
Direct-to-feature.
Directing features. But it never, for whatever reason, it never happened. And early on, I started making money in television, and so I went for it. And then I was always singing the blues. How am I going to get out of this? I want to make a feature, and so I would use these development deals to write screenplays. None of which got produced. So the Brillstein Gray thing was another one of those deals. And a guy who was working there at that time, Lloyd Braun, gave me this very inspirational speech. And at that time in my life, it was pretty hard to inspire me about television because I didn't like it. And he said that he had me over there because they felt that I had a great series inside me. This is exactly what he said, and I thought, and he meant it. And he said, we don't want to get in your way. All we want to do is help you get it out. And he said, for example, would you like to do a series about The Godfather? This is in the lobby at Brillstein Gray. I said, no, I don't want to do a series about The Godfather, but I do love gangsters. So driving home, I remembered this had been a movie idea. The Sopranos had been a motion picture idea.
That you'd had.
That I'd had, which my agents had said, don't bother developing that because it won't sell. And so I'd listened to that. And so I had this idea in the back of my head, and I thought, I wonder if I could make that into a TV series. And so that's what happened. And originally it was It was developed for the Fox network. And once the script was written, they passed on it.
And what was the idea? The original idea was the relationship with the mother and the son?
The original story was, yes, about a guy, a gangster, who has a very difficult mother, who is not a typical mob mother. I had read about this mob grandmother in Philadelphia, rather the head of the mob in Philadelphia at that time. Apparently she was quite a contender and a very difficult woman. And so I was interested in doing this mother-son thing, having to do with the son, this gangster finally has to go get psychotherapy. And
because of his problems.
Because of his problems with his mother. Yeah. Gang war is declared. His mother is angry at him for putting her in a home, or for neglecting him. I don't know if I had the home at that point, but she's angry at him for neglecting her. And the therapist, because she has a window into his mind and is listening to all this stuff about his mother, is the one who says, I think your mother may be the one who's behind this gang war. That was the original idea.
I see. Well, I can see how that evolved.
And so that's kind of
that did sort of spread out into the whole season.
Right.
Fascinating.